This could be possibly the most important thing you're going to hear about davening. There is a stira in the Rambam. The Rambam, the great Rambam, contradicts himself, apparently. In one place he says, what's the minimum concentration you need to have when you daven Shemona Esrei? When you daven the Amida, what's the minimum kavanah you need to have? He says, at least the first bracha. If you don't concentrate well in the first bracha, then you have not fulfilled your obligation. If you got the first bracha down well, even if you don't have kavanah the rest of the Shemona Esrei, no problem, you're fine. In another place, the Rambam says, you need to have kavanah the entire Shemona Esrei. If there's any point you don't have kavanah, sorry, no good, you haven't davened effectively. That's an open contradiction. Says Reb Chaim Soloveitchik in the very first piece that he talks about this Rambam, he says the following thing. Incredible yesod of davening. He said there's two fundamental types of kavanah when you daven. The first one is the well-known one, which is what the words mean. The words that you need to have kavanah for the very first bracha, and if you don't, you're not yotze, you have not fulfilled your obligation. But there's a more fundamental type of kavanah. That is that I know that I'm speaking to someone, capital S, capital O. If I have a conversation or I'm mispalel, I talk to Hashem and I don't know that I'm speaking to him, I don't remember that I'm speaking to someone, then it's not an act of prayer. It's an act of reading the siddur. It's an act of studying the prayers, but it's not an act of prayer. If I have a conversation with you and I say, yes, how are you? How's everything going? Blah, blah. Oh, yes, that's nice, blah, blah. And I suddenly just walk away. That's not a conversation. That's reading a script. So the most fundamental thing we need to do when we daven is to recognize we're speaking to Hashem. If a person does that, you say, Baruch Atah. Not just that Hashem is actually aware of me or I'm sending a message and then he's reading the message later on. It's not like an email. He's actually looking at me right now. I'd say it's very similar to Skype. When you Skype with somebody, sometimes the other person doesn't have a video on the other side, right? So you can hear them, but you can't actually you can't see them. But let's say you're Skyping with someone and they have no video and they have no audio either, and you know they're listening to you. That means you're speaking and they can see you and they can hear you, but you can't see them and you can't hear them, but they're looking right at you like this. That is, in a certain sense, the conversation we have with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. That's the most effective thing that we can do. And we recognize that that's what's going to make our tefillah the most real and the most effective. Now, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is invisible, so it's very hard to speak to someone who's not actually visible to us because we're used to speaking to someone that we can see. Of course, now and then you have a chance to speak to someone that you don't actually see, like on the phone, and we know they're there even though you don't actually see them. But at least you can hear them and you say hello, hello, and they respond. But speaking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is difficult. Now, the thing is like this. You can practice by thinking that you're speaking to Kodesh Baruch Hu like you speak to someone lahavdil on Skype. And when you speak to someone on Skype, even if they don't see you, even if you can't see them and you can't hear them, if you know for sure they're listening, then it's a totally different experience. Now, the thing is like this. When you speak to somebody else, you have a clear feeling that they're aware of you and that they're listening to you and they're looking at you. When we speak to Kodesh Baruch Hu, Hashem is no less real than anyone else. He's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He's Yud Kei Vav Kei, Lashon of Havaya, which means existence. The language of Hashem's name is existence. All existence sources comes from Hashem. Hashem gives everything existence. So he's the only one that really exists. Everything else has less existence than him. He's the most, he's the source. So we speak to Hashem. Hashem is just as real as everyone else. He's more real than everyone else. So anytime we address Hashem, we say, Hashem, you. So he naturally can look at us and does look at us, and it focuses, so to speak, his attention on us. Keeping that in mind makes the tefillah much more real. Knowing that Hashem is real and alive and present and watching and sensing us as we speak to him totally changes the nature of our tefillah. It's not just I say the words and I send them off, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're looking at me right now. You're aware of me. You're watching me right now. That has to be the focus in our Shemona Esrei. Every time you say Baruch Atah Hashem, and throughout the entire Shemona Esrei. If we don't have that, it's not a Ma'aseh Tefillah. It's not an act of prayer. So that has to be our focus, and that has to be the main effort that we put in when we daven. Now, a person should not be discouraged, of course, and say, like, I can't focus on the fact that Kodesh Baruch Hu is there the whole time. We can practice. And after a period of time, Be'ezus Hashem will be matzliach. So therefore, Tefillah becomes an exercise in emunah chushis, in feeling that Kodesh Baruch Hu is here, in talking to him and being aware that he's here and changing my life because the Kodesh Baruch Hu is aware. Now, not that he ever changes, but I have to become aware that he's aware. And that's why the word Baruch is all over davening, because the word Baruch means expansion, and I'm expanding my awareness of a Kodesh Baruch Hu in the world. So that's a completely different perspective on davening. I have to become aware that he's aware.